All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's forecasting forum. I'm excited that you all could make it. There is a chat window, so feel free to use it if you'd like to. And we'll jump right in because we have a lot to cover today. So let me just go to the next screen already. Hold on. Here we go. I hope everybody can see that. So let's get started with just getting a little bit of a sense of who's here today or right now. How many of you have Capricorn planets in your natal chart? And feel free to just, type into the chat window to let me know if you do. And I'm sure probably a lot of you do. That's why you're interested in joining us today, right? Hi, Terry. Good to see you. Okay, Kay says she has a Cap North node and Chiron. Yes, very good. I have a Capricorn North node as well. Very good. That's my only Capricorn thing that I got, but hey, it's not nothing. The North node is pretty big, right? That's our soul's journey. So that's where I'm heading, is Capricorn. I'm heading to Capricorn. Okay, Bear has Neptune in the 6th house in Capricorn and the DC as well. Very good. Excellent. All right, so I can see we have some Capricorn actions going on here. Riches has also the descendant. Okay, so relationships, right? You deal with relationships in a Capricornian kind of a way, or you attract Capricorns into your life, right? All right, so how many of you have Saturn conjunct the ascendant, which is, the rising sign, your sun sign, or your moon sign? So having the planet Saturn very, very close to one of your personal points, the rising sign, sun, or moon. Anybody? Terry has South Node and Mercury in Capricorn. Very good. Excellent. Yes. Definitely South Node in Capricorn. That's a Capricornian person for sure, right? You've done it many, many times in many, many past lives. You've done Capricorn. All right. Anybody has Saturn in a strong placement in the chart? Rising sign, sun, or moon sign? Nobody? We've got nobody with Saturn in a strong... I know there are people who have Saturn on the ascendant because I know you guys charts. You're just maybe not here yet. Okay. Saturn trines the sun. Okay, very nice. Terry has Saturn conjunct the sun. Very good. Excellent. Good for you. Yeah, so anybody who has Saturn very close to the ascendant, sun, or moon sign, that also makes you a very Capricornian person, right? Because you have a very strong Saturn. So you will really understand what I'm talking about today when we talk about all those Saturn qualities that we're going to be covering, right? But before we dive in, I just want to thank all of you guys for coming here today, for joining us for the next 90 plus minutes. We might go over a little bit today because this is a big subject, because Saturn is moving into Capricorn until 2020, which I think that has such a good sound, 2020. I like that. I think it's going to be a good year. Anyways, so because this is going to be a big subject, we might go over a little bit. So feel free to either hang in there or watch the recording afterwards, okay? And so for those of you who are watching it as a recording to begin with, hang in there or watch it in increments, whatever works for you. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Austria, from Vienna in Europe. And so my English is not my first language. So if I make mistakes or if I say things a little bit funnily, then definitely just ignore that. That's just because English is not my first language. But I try to be as clear and concise as I can be, especially during the Mercury retrograde, which we have right now. So that might be a little bit challenging as well. But we'll do our best, right? Now, I have been living in the United States since 1994. So I'm pretty much, comfortable with being an American or with the English language as it is. So I'm not a newbie here. And I've been doing astrology for a long time. I've been studying it since the early 90s. I've got my certification in 2005. And then I started my business in 2010. So I've been doing this now professionally full-time. Well, semi-full-time. In the beginning, it was sort of part-time, and then it's been full-time since 2014. So the past 3 years full-time, the past 7 years part-time. And before then, definitely it's been a huge hobby of mine. So as you can see, it's been a long-time commitment for me so far. And I love it. I'm excited. I'm glad that I started this business. And I hope that all of you are benefiting as well from this through my videos, through my weekly forecasts, and through my webinars right now. And I'm also, you know, expanding, you know, at the end of the year or the beginning of next year into a huge online community as well that I'm creating right now. So there's lots and lots of stuff coming in 2018 for all of you. So I'm very excited that all this is unfolding. I can't wait. All right. So, but let's focus on what we're doing today. Today, Saturn obviously going from Sagittarius to Capricorn. Saturn feels very comfortable in Capricorn because Capricorn is its own sign, right? It's in a sign that it feels very comfortable and very familiar with. The energies of Capricorn and Saturn resonate very closely with each other. So they feel very, you know, camaraderie-like with each other. So whenever Saturn is in Capricorn, it feels like it's at home, right? And so it journeys there until December 2020, with a brief exception between March and July of 2020, when it's already moving into Aquarius for a little bit. Then it starts retrograding back into Capricorn. And then by the end of the year, then it moves out of Capricorn for good, and then it moves into Aquarius. So we have a good 3 years of like Saturn in Capricorn. And so, so what we're going to cover today is like, where does Capricorn fall in your own birth chart, right? Because we want to be able to relate this to our own charts. So where is it in your own birth chart, right? And then where does Saturn make aspects to natal planets in your chart, right? We want to know that too, because that helps to understand how to work with those energies. And then also, what houses does Saturn journey through between now and December 2020, right? Because it may not just be one house that it's actually journeying through, it may be several houses. So we'll cover a little bit of that as well, and we'll do as much as we can. And then at the very end of the webinar, we'll get to all the questions that have been so beautifully submitted. So thank you everyone for participating so actively and asking so many questions. We definitely have an abundance today. So I will try and get to as many as I can. Now, I can't pull up anybody's birth chart during the webinar, but if I already have your chart because you're a client of mine, great, then it's right here in my pile. If you send me your chart via email prior to the webinar, I also have it here in my pile. And for future webinars, if you do ask questions and you want me to have your birth chart, please send it to me in advance before the webinar. All right. I would also like to focus on questions that are connected to each of the energies that we're discussing in each of the webinars. So today we're going to be focusing on the questions regarding Saturn and Capricorn. All right. And most of you were very good about that, actually. So we won't have any issues with that. All right. So let's go to the next page, which is something that I've emailed you guys, which all of you should have, which is the overview for 2017, which now, of course, is coming to an end already, right? And so we're looking at December of 2017. And the thing, obviously, there's a lot going on this month. As you can see, there's multiple things. The Mercury retrograde, the Chiron stationing direct. We have a new moon in Sagittarius. We have Saturn journeying into Capricorn. We have the Uranus station. We have the winter solstice. We have Mercury going direct again. So there's so many things happening. So this month, if you're not busy, then tell me your secret. Okay, if nothing's going on for you, then tell me your secret, all right? But there's definitely lots and lots of things going on this month, right? So, but the thing that we want to focus on, because it's such a big shift for all of us, is that Saturn in moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn, which we have here, which I'm going to highlight right now, so you guys can see that a little bit better. I hope this is beautifully highlighted. And so December 19th, midnight, which is December 20th in Europe or in other countries, until March 2020, and then again December 2020 after, you know, Saturn goes retrograde and comes back into Capricorn. All right, so let's get started. Let's take a look at does everyone have their birth charts ready and able to look at, because we're going to need those. So if you don't, feel free to right now, print out your birth chart. And Lisa, I saw that Lisa raised her hand. If you have a question for me, please be so nice and write into the chat window. That's the best way to connect with me right now. All right, so let's move on to the next chart here that I want to show you guys, which is my my own birth chart. Okay, so let's take a look at my birth chart here real quick, because the reason why I'm pulling that up is not because I'm more interesting than anybody else in this world, but because it's just as a sample or an example, so you can see how to apply it to your own birth charts, because I can't be showing everybody's birth chart. It will take up too much time, right? So, oh, okay, got it. So Lisa was saying she raised her hand because she wanted to see who printed out the charts, and she wanted to say I did. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for clarifying that. That was very smart on your part. I haven't actually considered that, so thank you for saying that. Okay, good. So, so if everybody has their birth charts now, take a look at it. Either looks a little bit like this chart here to the left, or it looks a little bit more like this chart to the right. Unless your chart looks completely different than that, then I'm sorry that I don't have a good sample for that. But this chart to the right is an astro.com chart. To the left, that's a time passage chart. So sometimes the charts look a little bit different depending on what astrology program you're using, right? But they're still the same charts, right? So even though they visually look a little different. So if you can see here, you know, my rising sign is Libra. On this end here, you can also see Libra here and the ascendant here, which is in a very late degree of Libra, and therefore the ascendant looks like it's almost in Scorpio already, but it's still in Libra, right? So that's kind of like the difference between the visuals between those two charts, all right? I hope this makes sense. Now, what we want to look for first is where is our natal Saturn, right? Because here's the thing. Whenever we're dealing with a transiting planet, this transiting planet, wherever it moves in our chart or whatever it moves through and whatever other planets it hits, that is always related back to our natal placement, because natally, where we have Saturn, that's the house and the sign, how we personally live out the Saturn energy. So when transiting Saturn comes around, whatever that transiting planet is doing, it reflects back to our own personal ability to do Saturn, right? I hope this makes sense. So let's take a look at, so the Saturn symbol looks like this, like on the left side, it's brown here, right? The Saturn symbol. And here on the right chart, it looks like this, right? And I have Saturn in Gemini in the 8th house. So you can see here, Gemini is this sign, and here's a little number 8 on this sign, on this side, and on this side we have a little number 8 right here, right? So these are the houses. So when you see these numbers here, those are the houses, and here the numbers are on the outside of the wheel, and those are the houses, okay? So the houses are important for us on a personal level, because Saturn, of course, takes 2.5 years to travel through each sign, right? And it takes about almost 29 years, 28.5 to 29 years to cycle through the whole zodiac, right? But 2.5 years approximately, sometimes a little bit more than 2.5 years to go through each sign, right? So basically, for those 2.5 years that Saturn is in the same sign, that whole generation that was born in those 2.5 years, or all the babies that were born in those 2.5 years, will have the same Saturn, right? So therefore, we also want to know what house is it in, because that makes it a little bit more personal to where in life is Saturn affecting us, or how do we work with our Saturn, in what area of life, right? So the best thing to do now is to look at the handout that I also emailed you, which has to do with the houses, right? And I'm going to pull that up right here so you can see that right in front of you, right here. Okay, so this is the handout that I sent to you with the houses. So here, you take a look here with this handout to check and see to check and see what house is your natal Saturn in, right? Because that house placement, that is the placement where you need to work with the Saturn energy as much as you can. This is the placement that as you get older, the better you get at using the Saturn energy in that house. Now, in my personal chart, it's in the 8th house, right? So if we scroll down here and we look at the 8th house, that is the area of intimacy, deep connections, endings and beginnings, power struggles, shared resources, financial matters that include other people, you know, blah, 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 and so on, right? So for me, it's important to be very focused there, to be very mature there, to take responsibility there, to make sure that I work hard on making this work for me, this area of my life. So, you know, intimacy, of course, could also be, you know, marriage. You know, if you're married and you're working through intimate issues with another person, you also have shared resources when you're married, right? So the 8th house, I would say, is very much the house of marriage, even though some people say it's the 7th house. But for me, the 7th house is the idea of marriage and the wanting to get married. But the 8th house is where we actually are doing the day-to-day of the marriage, you know, where we're really working through emotional stuff with each other. We're working through the financial issues that we have, or we're combining our finances. So it's definitely sort of like seems much more of a marriage house to me than the 7th. But maybe that's because I have my Venus there. That's possible too. But anyways, I have Saturn there as well. So it's important for me to really make sure that I work hard at my 8th house issues, right? With my partner, with my with intimacy. You know, this also has to do with sexuality. So needing to really work through some stuff around all these issues in my life, right? Now, Saturn also has to do with time. You know, we need to take our time with Saturn. Saturn is not fast. Saturn says, take your time, take it one step at a time, and don't rush. It's about patience. It's about doing it right, because Saturn wants us to have a healthy foundation, healthy boundaries. It wants us to have something that lasts, something that can be a long-term solution or a long-term foundation for things, right? So all of this is, and Saturn is very realistic in its approach. It needs to see things in a very matter-of-fact way. Is it working or is it not working? And if it's not working, what do we need to do so that it can work better? Right? So we're never giving up. It's persistency, it's consistency, it's diligence, it's effort. You know, we keep going. We keep going. With Saturn, there is no stopping. There is no giving up. And it's also very much about approaching it from an adult perspective, from a mature perspective, and from a place of integrity. Right? It's very much about integrity as well, Saturn, a healthy Saturn anyways, right? So as you can hear, all these words, these Saturn words, right? That if you look at that area in your own chart where you have Saturn, right? You want to apply all those Saturn keywords to that area of your life, right? You want to make sure that you really work through some of these things that you need to work through, and you need to stay consistent, and you need to keep going. Don't give up. And it's also a place where we sometimes feel a little insecure. We could feel a little inadequate, especially when we're younger, because when we're younger, we don't know everything yet, and we haven't really been through the test of time. We don't really have this strong responsibility or this strong sense of authority over anything, you know, which comes with time, which comes with maturity, which comes with adulthood and living through things and doing things diligently and persistently, right? So for that reason, when we're younger, very often with Saturn, so if you haven't had your first Saturn return yet, right, which happens at the age of 28 and a half or 29, if you haven't been there yet, then the Saturn placement in your natal chart may feel a little bit more, where you feel more insecure and a little bit more, not quite sure if you have the authority yet to make this work really at your best. You may feel a little bit inadequate there still, but once you have your first Saturn return, after 29 or after the age of 30, depending on, what degree your Saturn is in, at that point, you're really moving into adulthood. After the first Saturn return, we're moving into adulthood, and we're starting to take life more seriously, because Saturn is also about, taking things more seriously. And so we're really learning how to apply ourselves a little bit more seriously to the task of Saturn, to the efforts of Saturn that we want to. And it's also partially sort of like a little bit of a karmic energy, a karmic planet, right? Because it wants us to really get good at something. And as we're working towards that goal, we reap the rewards of whatever we put in, which that's karma, right? Karma is you get back what you put in, right? It's just you take action and you have a result, right? And that's really all it is. And that's how Saturn works. You do what you do, and the more you do, the more you get back, and the less you do, the less you get back, right? So with Saturn, we always know what we're getting because we know what we've personally put into it, right? So, and if we've put a lot into it, we get a lot of rewards. We get a lot in return, right? So it's really sort of like a tit for tat type of energy in that sense, right? Now, Terry's saying that he's moving towards his second Saturn return in 2020. And so if you have your second Saturn return coming up with Saturn in Capricorn, then you are certainly going to move towards a new cycle in your life, which is a little bit different from the first Saturn return, because the first Saturn return is about stepping into a more mature place. However, the second Saturn return, you've already done 30 years of seriousness and maturity and working through stuff and, doing your best. And hopefully, I mean, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, then the second Saturn return is another awakening of needing to be mature and needing to be more of an adult. But if you have been doing some of that work, some of that Saturn work, the prior 30 years, then your second Saturn return is really all about recognizing how far you've come, what you have accomplished, and to start to give back. To start to give back to society, to start to give back to the younger generations, to maybe give your authority or your expertise or your elderly advice to the people that are now coming behind you and that are now moving into adulthood, or that are, trying to work through life, right? Because at the second Saturn return, you're moving into what's called the cycle of elderlies, right? In a sense, you're moving towards the elderly placement of like being more of an authority figure, being more seasoned, being more capable of giving advice, and being more capable of knowing how to live life, right? And so at that point, you're really learning how to appreciate what you've done so far, what you've learned so far, and how to give back, okay? So that's really the second Saturn return. Now, some other things that are connected to Saturn that are very important is Saturn has to do with structure. So it has to do with the structures that we build in our lives, So depending on what house it's in your own natal chart, depending on what sign it's in, there are certain foundations or structures that you're learning to build and to appreciate and to work with, right? And a sound and healthy foundation always can remain strong through time, so it can withhold the test of time in a sense, right? So if a Saturn energy is not being used in a healthy way, then we're not capable of having good foundations. We're not capable of having healthy boundaries, for example. And healthy boundaries, which I like to talk about in my videos as well quite often, have to do with, kind of like understanding that a boundary is not rigid, but it's also not, too loosey-goosey, right? So a healthy boundary is knowing in each moment of now what's appropriate to honor oneself, or to honor what is right for us, right? So, but the key word is each moment of now. So this is not something that we can make into a rule or principle. It's something that we really need to honor moment to moment, right? Because things change, life is change, right? So, and Saturn knows that. But when we get fearful, and this is something that's sort of like a lower vibration of Saturn, when we feel insecure and we get fearful about how to be an authority, or how to set that healthy boundary that we want to set. If we get fearful, we tend to get rigid, or we get to, or sometimes we get depressed, or we check out, right? But it's basically, when we're fearful, we're making something into a rule or into a principle that we then live by for the rest of our lives. But then, of course, there is no freedom in that. And then, of course, we're limiting ourselves. And so Saturn's limitations, very often come from not being able to set a healthy boundary, but setting a rigid boundary, right? So when you experience limitation from the outside world, or when you experience limitation in your own life, because when you have a Saturn transit, or because of something in your own chart with Saturn, right? Then just remember that could very well be from an internal resonance of how you use the Saturn energy in a too rigid way, right? Or in a too loosey-goosey kind of a way. Could be either way, right? Not understanding how to create a healthy Saturn. And a healthy Saturn, comes with time. As we get older, as we get more mature, we're learning a little bit better how to use Saturn in a healthier way. And so especially, of course, if you have, let me go back to my chart here, because I just want to kind of show you on a chart here as well. So depending on what aspects you have to your own natal chart, Saturn, right? If you have harmonious aspects to your natal Saturn, right? Like I have Uranus trining Saturn, and then I have Jupiter sort of like in a wide trine to Saturn as well. But then I also have an inconjunct with my moon, for example, right? So that's not such a harmonious aspect. That's more of a challenging aspect, right? So whatever aspect you have with your Saturn, it's very important that you kind of like work with the especially the challenging aspects, right? Because the harmonious ones, they come a little bit more easily, and we don't think about them as much, right? We sort of take them for granted a little bit, right? But the challenging ones, those are the ones that where we really have to put some effort into it. And very often, when Saturn is involved with another planet, especially a personal planet in your own chart, that means that that's something that your soul came in with, that she or he or it really wanted to work something through, and wanted to really have a better understanding of how to work with those energies. So in my chart, for example, it's an inconjunct to the moon. So when it comes to my feeling energy, to my emotions, when it comes to nurturing myself, when it comes to the mother energy, right? Or how I perceive my own personal mother, there have certainly been a feeling of limitation and restriction in my life, right? Growing up. And now that I'm an adult, I need to learn how to adjust myself in such a way that I can be less rigid with myself when it comes to my feeling state, when it comes to my needs, when it comes to taking care of myself. I need to learn how to see what's appropriate in the now, what's appropriate right now for me versus, making a blank statement or a blank rule, or creating a principle and saying like, I need this all the time, or here's the rule, in order for me to feel okay, or in order for me to have my feelings, I need to do this, right? So I hope this makes sense what I'm saying here. So it's really about Saturn is very much a planet that likes to be in the now. However, of course, as we're all human or humans that want to create and achieve, which is also a Saturn trait. We want to achieve, we want to move forward, we feel very ambitious in that Saturn placement. So sometimes we get fearful that we can't get to where we want to go. But what we don't realize with Saturn is that if we give ourselves the time, and this is really, Saturn is all about time. If we don't speed it up, but if we kind of slow it down, and if we give ourselves time to get to where we want to go, we will get there eventually, and we will have fantastic rewards once we get there. So we need to be patient, right? With Saturn, we need to be very patient, because if we're not, that's when we really get in trouble with Saturn. That's when we can start to feel either depressed, or we can start to feel overwhelmed, or we can start to feel, deficient, or, not like we're not good enough in some way, or we're not being able to achieve something. That's when we get to a more pessimistic place, when we don't give ourselves patience and time in that area of our lives, and with those energies, and also in terms of the aspects, if it's connecting to another planet, that other planet also needs the adjustment, or the patience of Saturn, right? And the healthy boundaries, the healthy approach, the healthy foundations, all of that is very important. I hope all of this makes sense, what I'm sharing here, because I want to actually move on now to talking about the transits and the houses a little bit. Have a fantastic December, have a fantastic holiday. Have a wonderful entry into Capricorn, and just know that, whatever you make it, it will be. That's how simple it is with Saturn in Capricorn. You make what you want to create, right? So it's really just whatever you put in is what you get out. So deal with it consciously and deal with it in a mature manner, all right? So have a good one, and I shall see you in the new year. All righty, in 2018. Woohoo! All right, bye-bye, guys. Have a good one.